Anatta Pandika was a prominent sponsor of Buddhism when the Buddha was still alive. And so we've been talking about how he became the disciple of the Buddha. And we talked about him being a wealthy patron. And now we have been talking about his family. So we started to talk about his family, about his wife, and then his 4 children. He had 2 daughters, and he had 2 daughters that attained stream entry, 入流, the Nyablu. Stream entry is the first level of sagehood, according to Theravada, 南传, Namjung, 佛教, 南传佛教, Namjung, 佛教 Namjung. But according to Theravada Buddhism, but his youngest daughter, Samana, surpassed them all because she was able to achieve the fruit of one's returning, so which is the second stage of sagehood, Shitohan, right? Thudaham. And we talked about the criteria for attaining such fruit, consisting in 5 fetters that need to be broken. 5 fetters that need to be broken. One is a self-identity view, skeptical doubt, and attachments to rites and rituals. We talked about those. And last time, we talked about sensual desire. Now we will talk about ill will, the 5th feather at the minimum that you need to eliminate in order to achieve the second stage, the non-returning, the fruit of non-returning. Okay, so just a quick review. Sensual desire here is having the experiences or cravings through the senses of our senses. Those are the 6 organs. Essentially, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body for touch, and the brain for mental phenomena. So through those 6 senses that we experience the world, and without awareness, we have attachment to pleasure sensations, and we will have aversion to unpleasant sensations. And that's what keeps us within the cycle of life and death, because without awareness, we become either attached or become repulsive, but then we're still running back to the samsara. So that needs to be eliminated in order to be liberated from the cycle of life and death. Okay, so today we will spend time to talk about ill will or malice. And this is the same element of in the 10 unskillful karma, 十善 tapting, which is the 9th of the 10th unskillful karma. Ill will is essentially its hateful wish that harm will befall on another, or that one feels satisfied when other people fail or get hurt. So that's ill will. Ill will is a hindrance. Ill will is a hindrance to jhana, 禅定, 听人. Because the reason is because it obstructs the jhanic factor of rapture or piti, which is xi or hei. So this is a state where you feel very blissful, very happy in a state of meditation. And when there is ill will in our heart, it prevents us from experiencing the blissful state of meditation. And that's why it's a obstruction, 障碍, 阻碍. In other words, one cannot enter the state of mind of meditation with emotional negativity, right? With ill will or malice, which is the wish that others will get hurt or the wish to hurt others, is one of emotional negativity. And that will prevent us from entering the meditation or to enjoy meditative bliss. Malice is kind of similar to it. It is one of the 5 hindrances, 障碍, 阻碍, to jhanic meditation, a jhana meditation, 禅定, 听人, which also obstructs jhanic factor of pretty or rapture, right? 喜 or 喜. So those are, 喜 is喜 here, or pretty or 喜 lạc, vui mừng. It's a state where you feel your bodily sensations all tingling with happiness. So that's pretty. You feel very joyful, and you only feel joyful if there is emotional positivity in you, right? But if there is a wish to harm somebody, then that is emotional negativity. There's negativity, and that essentially negates your positivity. So that's why it becomes an obstruction, because it doesn't allow you to enter meditation. For ill will and malice, according to one explanation, only extreme forms of defiled thinking are considered to be a course of mental action, such as wish to take one is not given, or not stealing, or harmful intent to hurt somebody. So it is only extreme forms that will constitute mental action, meaning that there is so much intention, so much focus, that even though you are not taking action, it is considered a course of action. But the lesser forms of defiled thinking, afflictions, 烦恼, the lesser forms of defiled thinking are still unskillful, but do not constitute a course of action. It's because there isn't enough karmic energy to take the form of action, which may or may not lead to action. For example, if, let's say, one of your siblings tell you a joke, but you feel very offensive, and you may say something back in an angry way, but you don't mean it. So therefore, it's not karmically strong enough to lead to action, to harm him. So that is, even though you say something very angry, but it doesn't constitute mental action because it's not karmically strong enough. Okay, but on the other hand, a thought that is so evil or full of intention, that is equivalent to taking action. For example, like a serial killer, planning, plotting, making preparations. Now this is serious stuff, right? So even though he hasn't taken the action to kill anybody, but there is so much focus, so much intention in it, that it is equivalent to taking action. Ill will and malice will hurt us in two ways: emotionally and intellectually. And ill will and malice will make us fall rather than ascend spiritually. Will make us fall spiritually. Ill will clouds our wisdom. That's why it hurts us intellectually. And it hurts our ability, it clouds our ability to understand conditionality, 缘起法, 法缘起. That's conditionality, which will increase the egoism in our thinking, in our speech, in our behavior. And that leads to egoism, which 我执, ngã chấp. Right? So let's say that we're working on a research project for a company, for our company, and we try to win a big proposal, which is very important to the company's future. And let's say that we are the most senior and have put in lots of efforts, more than anybody else. So we've been there the longest, we put in the most effort. And as part of that down select process, the customer asked all the bidders, including our company and other companies, to come to a conference to present their cases as to why they should win the proposal. So given our seniority, efforts, and knowledge, we assumed that we are going to be the one to present at the conference to the customers on behalf of our company. But then at the last minute, the vice president of the company thinks that this proposal is too important to the company, and it cannot afford to lose it. So then she has decided to present to the customer instead of us. So that makes us very upset, because we were expecting something else, but then something else came and turned our plan upside down. So we get angry, but without expressing it, and we feel disrespected. as if our ego has been smashed into pieces. So we feel upset and disrespected. And the more we think about it, the more that the anger burns us. So during the conference, during the presentation at conference, with all the companies in attendance, the vice president was doing a good job, but we can't control our anger. And for some reason, we want her to fail to satisfy our anger. So we finally burst into anger in front of everybody, discrediting her and pointing out the hidden flaws in the proposal that the customers and other companies might have not found out. So in that moment, to satisfy our anger, we have ruined the company's chance of winning and our entire career. So not only did we ruin our career within the company, but we also have damaged our chances of any future employment with the other companies. So as such, in a flash, our career and our decades of success are over. Such explosion of anger can occur not only at the professional level, but also at the personal level, such as friendships or marriage. Okay. There's a saying in Buddhism that even a spark of anger can burn down the entire forest of merits and virtues. Right? So a single thought of anger can release thousands of destructions and disasters. So we put in a lot of hard work, decades of hard work, but in a flash of a moment, because of our anger, it destroys our entire career. And that is because anger has clouded our wisdom to see the long-term effect of our actions. It may be very satisfying at the time to bring down our opponent, which is the VP of the company, but then the result is that we not only hurt her, the company, but we also hurt ourselves. So anger clouds our ability to see things clearly. Even if it is justified to be angry at the EVP for being disrespectful to us, or unfair to us, intentionally or unintentionally, but we have this damage that we have to deal with for years to come, right? So now we have to do what to do with this damage. So anger can intellectually blind us to see the law of conditionality, 缘起法, 法缘可以, tricking us into believing that unskillful deeds are justifiable and satisfying. But we don't often see or because it clouds us because we don't often see or ignore the long-term consequences in order to satisfy our anger at the moment. So for example, let's give another example. Let's say we're driving on a freeway and the driver next to us on the other lane is driving irresponsibly with perhaps some distracted behavior, which he shouldn't be doing. And for some reason, his behavior annoys us greatly, and we think that he should be taught a lesson, right? So not to do this stupid thing. And when it came to the part where the two lanes merged, and he was supposed to yield to us by law, and we could have slowed down to let him in, but we maintain our right to the lane and we continue our speed, and then bam, he crashed into us. He was wrong to have crashed into us, but we were also hurt from the accident, right? So anger can cloud one's intellectual judgment and make one to become short-sighted, because just to satisfy our anger, to teach him a lesson, we also get hurt. So that's how it hurts us on the intellectual side. Now for the emotional side, anger or malice is mutually exclusive of emotional positivity, as we discussed. But we're going to go into a little bit deeper. Mutually exclusivity means that one cannot have both anger and meditative experience at the same time. It doesn't happen. You cannot be angry and be in deep meditation at the same time, because the two are mutually exclusive. When one is angry, one cannot sit still. but rather one wants to do something to satisfy his anger, usually by wanting his object of anger to get hurt equally or more, right, to satisfy our anger. So this, of course, disturbs the mind and cannot result in calming the body. When the mind is agitated, the body is uncomfortable, vice versa. If your body is comfortable, your mind is likely to be comfortable. So the body and the body and the mind are very closely connected. When you are healthy, when you are comfortable, it is more conducive to meditative experience. You can absorb your mental activity, 摄心, right? You can concentrate easier when the body is healthy. So that's why we should not just ignore one side, but only focus on the mind. But we should also pay attention to the body. The body, we should eat healthy, right? We should exercise and not just say, oh, I just need to focus on the mind and meditate, and everything else will follow. Not necessarily the body. If we don't exercise, then it will not be healthy. It will not be strong enough. So it's like the Buddha was able to withstand harsh practice was because when he was young, he exercised, he practiced martial arts, so he was very physically fit. And so when that allowed him to endure, the physical strength that he put on the body. So same thing, we should be responsible for the body as well as the mind. So we should exercise, eat well, and not just focus on the mind, because that's one-sided. That's too extreme. So because we have the body and mind, we have to be responsible for both, and not neglect one and indulge on the other. Right? So the body and mind go together. So when the mind is agitated, the body is uncomfortable, vice versa. And if we don't take control of our anger, controlling the mind, and allow it to grow, then it will counteract any emotional positivity already developed in us. If we allow our anger to continue, then any happiness, any joy in us will be depleted, will be destroyed. So anger is destructive, because the more anger that we have, the more anger we will be, right? More anger, we will be angrier, wanting to destroy ourselves and others, essentially. On the other hand, with more compassion, loving kindness, 慈悲, 德悲, which is a very positive emotion, one will be more compassionate in wanting to help others. This is what the Buddha says in Dhammapada, 法句经, Kinh Pháp Cú. Right? That to overcome the angry with non-anger, overcome the wicked with good, overcome the miserly by giving, the teller of lies with truth. But it doesn't work the other way. Anger cannot overcome compassion. Only compassion can overcome anger. And that's why it doesn't help to be angry. Only delusional people will want to be angry. But a wise person knows that anger doesn't help. Long term, it doesn't help. It may be satisfying at the moment, but long term, we will have to live with it for years to come. Right? So we should be wise and recognize that anger in the long term does not work. If one is emotionally agitated and negative, one cannot develop calmness through the practice samatha. Samatha is calming meditation, 修止, 督止. So that's samatha. Samatha, which is calming meditation, when we develop it as a foundation, it helps us to have a strong foundation of meditation. But without samatha, one cannot be successful in wisdom meditation, which is vipassana, 修观, 度观. And without developing wisdom, one cannot permanently transform and refine one's consciousness. This is important because sitting in meditation and enjoying that meditative bliss does not transform us. That's why we need to have wisdom. In meditation, when you sit in meditation, you can suppress your negativity with your positivity, but it doesn't transform you. It doesn't change your consciousness permanently. And when you exit meditation, you will that your affliction will still arise. This is why we need vipassana, 修观, 度观. Without such transformation through the practice of vipassana, one cannot be able to permanently maintain one's emotional positivity. Because you can suppress your negativity, but you are not transformed. It is not your natural state of being. It will spring back, 反弹. It will come back to your original self because you have not changed yourself. Then one is subject to retrogression, 退转, right? 推进. So unless you transform yourself, your consciousness, you are likely to regress, 退转, 推进, which is likely that one will slide back to the three lower realms, meaning the state of anger, greed, and delusion in the future life, right? 贪嗔痴. We will be attracted to that state of being if we cannot maintain our progress. That's why non-retrogression, 不退转, 不推进, that state of being is very important because it prevents us from sliding back to the lower three realms. The remedies for ill will and malice include meditation on loving kindness to increase one's emotional positivity. One can also meditate on sunyata or emptiness of phenomena, to strengthen wisdom and to lessen our egoistic attachment. So you can practice meditations on loving kindness to increase your positivity. And you can also practice meditations on sunyata, 空性, 空单, to prevent egoistic attachment, to prevent egoistic craving. But a word of caution here, we should understand with any remedy, care should be taken. Just like medications, right? We should follow the prescriptions in order to avoid hurting ourselves. And the precaution is that don't overdo it. All these practices are expediences, 方便, phương tiện. They are meant to help cure something. Just like the bamboo. If the bamboo bends this way to the left, then you want to correct it to bend to the right. But if it's already bending to the right, in order to make it correct, you have to bend it to the left. So whether you're bending it to the left or bending it to the right, it is not absolute. It depends on the situation. For example, if we practice sunyata and we don't have awareness, or when we practice loving kindness and we don't have awareness, then one becomes just emotional. Like, for example, letting people getting away with things, thinking that one is being nice or helpful, but one may actually make the situation worse. Right? If you're too kind to somebody, for example, like a child growing up, if you're too kind to the child, then the child expects the world to be kind to it. So when he grows up, he expects everybody to be nice to him. But as you know, in the workplace, not everybody is nice to us. And so when they are not nice, then when people are not being nice to the child, or when he has grown up now, he doesn't know how to deal with the situation. So because he's been exposed to that being pampered his whole childhood, so he becomes very fragile, essentially. So when when reality hits him, he can break because he is emotionally fragile. Right? But then on the other hand, you don't want to be too tough on a child where you can destroy his confidence. Because a child growing up can develop his or her confidence with the care and loving of the parents. Right? If he knows that he can always go back to his parents for love, then he is likely to not be under influence of peer pressure. His friend, his student, his friends at school may let's say they say, unless you follow us, we don't like you. But he doesn't care because he knows that he can always go back to his home. His parents will accept him, will love him. So that helps to build self-confidence when he knows that there is something for him to rely on. But if we overdo it, then we can we can make him so fragile that he doesn't know how to deal with difficulties. So again, a word of caution is that whether we practice sunyata or loving kindness, that we need to understand what is it that we're practicing, and that we should take the middle path, meaning to balance it with awareness, 正念, 真念. So mindfulness is very important in our practice. And without awareness and not understanding the meaning of emptiness, sunyata, 空性, 空单, then one becomes carefree and eventually careless and becomes out of touch with reality. Right? 空性 say, oh, nothing happens, nothing is real, nothing exists. But we don't understand what that means, and we don't have awareness, and we're not balanced. Then we are likely to become carefree. We stop caring because what is there to care? Nothing exists, right? So we should maintain that balance. We don't want to be too egoistically attached to anything, but yet we don't want to be carefree what it deprives us from helping other people to cultivate merits, 修福, 度福. Right? Because if we don't care about somebody, why would we put in the efforts to help anybody? Nothing exists. But if we do that, then we are depriving ourselves of opportunities to cultivate merits. And life without merits is very difficult, because we will encounter difficulties and nobody will be there to help us because we lack merit. Even if there are people who want to help us, but because we don't have merits, we don't have the condition to receive such help. Right? There are people who have depleted merit. When they had merit, whatever they wanted, they could have. But after they had depleted their merit, they had to resort to begging because they could not generate the things that they desired. But some people have depleted merits to a deficit, to a point where when they beg, nobody was willing to give them. Right? So we have to be careful when we study these principles that they are means to an end, not the end in themselves. Okay. So the message here is avoid the two extremes of egoistic attachment, 我执, ngã chấp, and carelessness. But balance it with awareness by contributing and helping others where we can. And we should observe the precepts, 持戒, 止业, to generate merits. And we should practice meditation to calm the body and mind, and to cultivate wisdom to permanently transform their consciousness, which will allow us to cut the roots of unskillful selfish desires and ill will. So in order to cut the root of ill will and malice, we have to follow the three steps, the traditional progress, the traditional process, which consists in precepts, observing the precepts, 持戒, 止业, and practice meditation and wisdom, 戒定慧, 业定对. So that is the traditional process of how to maintain our progress to prevent regression, 退转, 推进. Because when we are practicing when we are observing the precepts, we are generating merits. And life is pleasant when there is merit. Right? People will help us. We have a better time in terms of achieving what we want. When we have 福报, when we have merits, 福报, when we have merits, whatever need that we need, what help that we need, people will be there to help us. If not, then people, if we don't have merits, then we don't have the conditions to receive such help. That's why it is so fundamental that we practice giving of wealth, giving of knowledge, and giving of fearlessness. Right? 布施 bodhi. So 布施财, 布施法, 布施无畏. Bodhi tài, bodhi pháp, bodhi vô ý. So those three fundamental kinds of giving we should practice to minimize obstruction. Because the whole point with practice observing the precept is really to help us to integrate our lives. It's a life of commitment. Usually we are in bits and pieces. We have different personalities pulling us in different directions. Sometimes we are very committed, wanting to study Buddhism. Sometimes we want to enjoy the world. Sometimes we are upset. Sometimes we are happy. Sometimes we are tired. Sometimes we are energetic. So we have different personalities pulling us in different directions, and we are not integrated. And if we are not integrated, when we sit in meditation, we cannot concentrate, because integration is concentration. And if we cannot concentrate, we cannot maintain the positivity for a long time. We may be happy the first few seconds, but after that, we are now have scattered thoughts, scattered feelings, and therefore we cannot concentrate. This is why observing the precepts, 持戒, 止耶, is so important to Buddhist practice, because it helps us to concentrate our mind. When we live a life of commitment, then we are building that foundation. And so when we practice meditation, it is very easy for us to concentrate. It is very conducive to meditation, 修禅, right? 读听. And when we practice meditation and when we are concentrated, then we can maintain our joy for a long time. And it allows us enough time anyways to see reality, because our mind is now free of bias. But we can see it more on the positive side. And we can see reality from a better light. Right? We can see conditionality, 缘起法, 法缘起. And that allows us to not become egoistically attached, or become careless or irresponsible. And when our consciousness is transformed permanently, then we are now in the progression without regression. 推进, 退转. So I hope you can see the relationship of the traditional practice, precepts, meditation, wisdom, 戒定慧耶定对, is so fundamental to the success of our cultivation. So this concludes the 5 fetters of the fruit of one's returning. And this helps us to understand what it is like to be a sage of the second stage, right? What it is like to have the fruit of non-returning, by eliminating our self-view, skeptical doubt, attachments to rites and rituals, sensual desires, and ill will and malice. So when we can understand the reasons behind it, and we are aspired to achieve that, then it is very easy for us to continue to flow in that direction without obstructions. So the spiritual life is a natural state of emotional positivity, of merits, and of virtues, which is a state of no suffering, which is a state of what we call nirvana, right? Nibbana. So nirvana is a state of no suffering, and therefore when we practice these to eliminate these 5 fetters, then we are essentially paving the way towards nirvana, towards enlightenment. So speaking of spiritual life, let's return to the text. So let's return to the youngest daughter, Samana. Samana was able to achieve the second state of statehood, So she did not marry, but not because she had renounced marriage, but that when she saw the happiness of her two other sisters, she became sad and lonely. So according to this text, her spiritual strength did not suffice to overcome her depression, and she wasted away eating nothing, starving to death. But then she was able to reborn in the Tasita heaven, 都睡天trời đâu xuất, purging herself of the residual dependence on other people. This sounds rather negative and gloomy, but that's what this text described. But maybe we should understand behind the words, the meanings behind the words and not the words themselves. Because we know that heaven is not a gloomy state of being, right? Heaven is a very happy state of being. So I think it is more accurate to say that Sumana lost interest in what the world had to offer. She was looking for something else that the world could not offer. So she chose the Tasita heaven. Just like us, we want to go to Sukhavati, 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới. It's not because we are depressed, right? Because we're looking for something more. 愿离娑婆，心求极乐. That's a statement that say to renounce the world, but to be aspire for Sukhavati, 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới. So to renounce the world here is not because we hate the world or anything emotional, but we should see it as psychological. This is more spiritual. We renounce the world spiritually, not because we have no merits, we are poor little lives, that we cannot maintain a good life. It's not that. It's that we want to have something that the world cannot offer. Therefore, you have to go to Sukhavati in order to have it. So she chose the Tasita heaven, and the Tasita heaven here happens to be a very special place in heaven because of the dwelling of the Maitreya Bodhisattvas, Mila Pusa, Yilak Bota. And he is the next future Buddha to appear in this world. So that's why it's a special place. This is his final destination before descending to earth to become the next Buddha. It is said that Shakyamuni Buddha was also in the Tasita heaven before he came to earth. So Shakyamuni Buddha is the current Buddha, and Maitreya is the future Buddha, the next Buddha. So he has completed all his perfections in the final stage of spiritual development while dwelling in the Tasita heaven. So why did the Bodhisattva choose Tasita heaven and not something below or above it? Well, it is said that Tasita heaven is the most suitable place for a Bodhisattva in the sensuous realm, 欲界, 欲giới, because it is the peak of contentment. The heavens below it are just too coarse and not equivalent in merit, not deserving for him to be there. And the heavens above Tasita heaven are just too blissful, leading to ignorance. So one could say that heaven beings in general are not very wise. Sad to say, but they may attend the Buddha's Dharma talks, but when they return to the heavens, they completely forget about what they learned. They have more interest in increasing their merits and heavenly bliss than liberation from suffering in the samsara, 解脱, 娑婆世界, giải thoát đa bạ thế giới. So liberation from suffering in the samsara. Before we move on, I would like to make this little paragraph here has kind of prompted me 2 points that I want to discuss, 2 small points before moving on. The text says here that she went to the Tasita heaven without giving much background, other than that she was sad and lonely. But I kind of disagree with this. Maybe there's something behind it, but we should understand the meanings and not the words. we could assume that she must have learned about the Tasita heaven, either from the Buddha or the monks, and it attracted her. Fundamentally, we were not likely to go to a place that we don't know about or know much about. So in order to know, in order to go where we want to go, we need to know where it is and what it is, right? You will never want to go and live there forever, so to speak, a place, or commit yourself to a place that you have nothing, no knowledge of. You don't know anything about it. You don't know anybody about in that place. So it's not possible that for her to want to go to the Tasita heaven without knowing much about it, without being attracted to it. So we know about Sukhavati, Jila Sijie, Cực Thế Giới, because Shakyamuni Buddha introduced it to us via the scriptures, right? We read the Amida Sutras, therefore we know about Sukhavati. If we want to be born in Sukhavati, we have to learn what it is, and we have to be attracted to it. We have to have this joyful faith. 自信信乐, chí tâm tính lạc, tính nhạo. So we have to have this attraction, this positive attraction towards Sukhavati if we want to be there. So by understanding the five, that's why we kind of spent some time talking about the five feathers here. It is to help us to understand what it is like to be a sage, so that we can prepare ourselves mentally. So it helps us, to kind of resonate with them, 感应, right? Because if we know nothing about them, then we cannot be, mentally prepared. So one main difference between the heaven and Sukhavati is that even though both are blissful without suffering, but heaven is still subject to the cycle of life and death, 轮回. And the heaven beings haven't eradicated their delusion. They still have delusion, 痴迷, si mei. Whereas Sukhavati is ever increasing in bliss and freedom towards enlightenment. In the heaven, we are always in this cycle. So if you look at this, you look at this line, and in the samsara, it is a cycle, right? So you can say this is joy, and this is suffering. We can never escape from this cycle of joy and suffering. So this is 无常. But in Sukhavati, there is also impermanence, 不停, 无常, is that it's, it's spirals upwards. Because we're changing we're going from happiness to bliss, to rapture and to bliss and to even more and more at a higher state. So this is still impermanence, 无常不停. But the difference is that one is stuck in the cycle, in the cyclic sense, where one can never escape from it. The other one is also changing, but it's changing ever increasing. Does it make sense? So that's the difference. So both are impermanent, 无常不停. But one is in a cycle, the other cannot escape. The other one continues to spiral up forever. So that's one difference between heaven and Sukhavati. Okay, so let's continue on with. So that's the youngest daughter. We have a few more minutes left. So let's talk about the son a little bit. The son of Anathapandika, Kala. Kala at first was estranged on his father's house or the family, and he did not know anything about the Dharma. And he was only interested in his business, in the family's business affairs. One day, the father urged him to observe the holy day, offering him 1,000 pieces of gold if he would keep the Uposatha day. I guess this is like a holiday where they just to avoid worldly joy, but to be more receptive to spiritual joy, where maybe they don't eat in the afternoon, or there's some religious observance here. At first, it did not weigh on him heavily, meaning that it didn't really impact him. But the father was relentless, right? So he made his second request, offering him another 1,000 pieces of gold for him to come for the son to come with him to the monastery to listen to the Buddha's teaching. And at that point, that it became the turning point of his life. And because of that he was able to commit to the Dharma, to the truth, and attained the fruit of stream entry, Ru Liu, Nyap Lu. So the very first stage of sagehood. So yes, so stream entry is the first stage of sagehood according to the Theravada tradition. Nanchuan佛教 Nam Jun. It is a point of no return. Essentially, once you reach this stream entry level, it is a point of no return that you are guaranteed to not slide back to the lower three realms, San Dao, Tam Ak Dao. Because you will not be doing anything unskillful to create the conditions for the sufferings of the three realms to occur. We can see that his initial exposure to the Dharma didn't make much impression. Because Karla had good roots, 善根, 田根, that on the second attempt that it changed him completely. So then what happened? What was it that allowed him to change permanently? Well, we can conclude that random or inconsistent spiritual practice is not strong enough to make a deep impression on the consciousness to transform it. Tibetan Buddhism, Mizong, Maktong, insists on prostrating to the Buddha statues, for example, like 100,000 times, or reciting mantras, 咒语, 100,000 times. So everything they do, like 100,000 times. And the reason is because this helps to increase one karmic momentum. I'm not saying that karma itself has momentum, but together you do it so often that it acts as if it has momentum on its own. We still are in control. It's just that our karma, when they are linked together with intensity in our practice and our focus, it builds up karmic momentum. So if one performs certain karmas, this will tend to enhance one's tendency to perform them, to continue to perform them. For example, if you like to give, 布施, bodhi, then you find joy in it. It motivates you to want to continue. And so then therefore you build up this karmic momentum. So through performing only positive and skillful action, 善业, 停业, over a continuous period, at the same time reducing the opportunities for unskillful mental actions, 不善业, 不停业, one gets into the habit of doing the karma, those things. If we tend to feel joyful when we hear the chanting of Amitabha or Amitofo, Nimphak, Ayida Phật, the brain correlates that signals of hearing the chanting with joy. So the brain correlates the chanting to joy. It correlates the two together. Then it will trigger the emotion of joy when we hear it again. And so if we keep hearing it and we keep having this joy, that connections become more and more vivid. Now that connection becomes more and more reinforce. Whenever it becomes a habit or a natural tendency, karma becomes weighty karma. And this is weighty karma, 重业造nghiệp. So when we do something over and over again, it becomes a habit, and that makes it weighty karma. The brain, so from a physiological perspective, from the brain's perspective, it forms neuronal connections over time, and over time the connections become hardwired, correlating certain actions to certain emotions. So when we do something and we have feelings, it makes that correlation, and when we continue to do that, then that connections become more and more hardwired. So meaning that under certain conditions, the brain automatically triggers certain electrical or chemical reactions, which correspond to certain feelings. When we keep reacting with emotions in the same manner, it reinforces the neuronal connections and becomes a habit, which becomes very difficult to change. So this is why when we find joyful in mindfulness of the Buddha, 念佛, 念佛, then it is very difficult for us to not be mindful of the Buddha, because it gives us joy, and the brain, and when there is joy, there is motivation, there is aspiration. So for Buddha name recitations or mindfulness, 念佛, 念佛, if one can maintain it on a regular basis, then it becomes a skillful habit. And it is generally this habitual karma, the overall karmic trend of one's being, which determines one's future life. So there's two things that we should understand here. Is one is weighty karma, and the other one is on a daily basis, where you don't, it's not very weighty, but you perform on a regular basis. But if by the time of death, one has performed no weighty karma, 重业造nghiệp, whether positive like meditation or negative like murder or killing other people, one's rebirth will be consequent upon the overall directionality of mind. Directionality of mind, your mind is heading in a certain direction, and you control it by performing it on a daily basis. So in other words, upon one habitual karma in this life. So there are two terms that I would like you to recognize. One is weighty karma. The other one is habitual karma. In a sense that weighty karma is very focused, very intense. It may be done once, but it is so full of focus that it defines you completely. The other one, habitual, is a habit, where you do it every day, maybe 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, but you do it for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or the rest of your life, becomes a habit. And at the time of death, if you have not done any weighty karma, then it defaults to your habitual karma. In meditation, it is very weighty, because in meditation you're very focused, right? You're very concentrated, and that focus, that concentration, builds up the weight of the karma. Does it make sense? Whereas habitual is that you do it on a regular basis every day, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, not very concentrated, but you keep doing. Every day you're reinforcing that neuronal connection, that action to your emotion. So at the end of one's life, if there is no weighty karma, like meditation, perhaps we don't have ability to enter deep meditation, so there's no weighty karma, for example, then it will default to our daily mindfulness of Amitabha, right? 日常念佛, right? Ngày thường niệm Phật. Then that is what takes us to Sukhavati. right? If we don't have any Vedic karma, those who have Vedic karma like deep concentration, then their Vedic karma can take them to Sukhavati, 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới. But if they, every day they practice, but there's no deep concentration, so there's no Vedic karma, so it falls back to our habitual karma. Every day we do it on it, our tendency of doing it daily and even hourly, right? So we increase the tendency. So we have this tendency, this direction. So there is no Vedic karma to obstruct us. Then it falls back to our habitual karma to take us to Sukhavati, 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới. Does it make sense? Right? So this is why for Pure Land practitioners, 净土学人, 等流học nhân. So for Pure Land practitioners, even if they may not be able to enter deep meditations while reciting Amitabha, 念佛, 念佛, and may even have many wandering thoughts, 妄想, vọng tưởng, and may not be feeling very emotionally positive. But it is still important to continue to recite on a regular basis, to turn it into a skillful habit. Right? It's the habit of just chanting, reciting Amitabha. So the effect here is that the result of our practice is really consists in two components. One is the time that we spent on it, multiplied by the intensity of our activity. So by involving mind, speech, and action in Buddha mindfulness, 念佛, 念佛, it is total involvement, right? And even if we cannot prostrate to the Buddha, 拜佛, 来佛, and we may not be able to chant Amitabha, but at least in our mind we should be thinking about it, meaning that when we interact with people, we should maintain awareness of what we're doing, and we should maintain the same attitude as those bodhisattvas in Sukhavati. So that helps us to increase our time that we spent in resonating 感应, 感恩, with resonating with Sukhavati. And our intensity, little by little, we link them up and becomes intensive, or at least becomes habitual. So if we can maintain single-mindedness, 一心不乱, nhất tâm bất loạn, while chanting Amitabha, so much the better. But it is not completely necessary. As long as we have this directionality of reborn in Sukhavati, then we are, in a way, a lower level of single-mindedness, 一心不乱, nhất tâm bất loạn, because our whole being is going in that direction. We may not be going very fast, right? We may not be traveling in a big vehicle and traveling at high speed, meaning that we may not be able to enter deep meditation, but at least maybe we're on a bicycle, bicycling towards in that direction. We may not be very fast, but at least we're heading in the correct directions. And that is our habit. So even though we don't have deep concentration, but every day we build up that habit, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, chanting Amitabha. Then that gives us, over a long course of time, 20 years, 30 years, and we don't give up. We continue that habit. We continue that directionality. Then we are building that habitual karma. And as long as we don't violate any of the precepts, 破戒, at least 重戒, or the violate the important precepts, then we are not violating, we are not creating negative, unskillful Vedic karma. Then it defaults to our habitual karma. Okay. Okay, so we have come to the end of the lecture. So just to briefly recap what we talked about. We talked about the last fetter of to enter the second stage, ill will, and this ill will is inconsistent with meditative joy, and without meditative joy, we cannot maintain joy for a long time, because it's meditation that allows us to maintain maintain that concentration. But we need to take one step further, and that is to meditate on, to practice wisdom meditation in order to transform our consciousness. In meditation, we only suppress our afflictions, 烦恼, 烦恼, but with the practice of vipassana, wisdom meditation, then we can transform our consciousness permanently. And we talked about the importance of importance of consistencies in our practice in order to build up karmic momentum. We may not have deep ability to enter deep meditation to create weighty karma, but our best chance is to fall back to habitual karma at the end of our lives, and that's what allows us to resonate with Sukhavati. So that is our best chance, and it's easy to do, right? If we continue on that path without giving up, the worst thing we can do is to give up such an easy practice, right? It doesn't require a whole lot, but we know we have a good chance when we know the formula, how to get there, to be heading in that direction, living an integrated life, heading in that direction towards Sukhavati. Okay? All right, so next time when we meet, we'll talk about Kala, the son, who was both, he had the positive and negative side of his lives too. And I think it gives us a full, colorful pictures for us to increase progress in our practice.